Ryan's Office Revenge. After 19 years at Midwest Manufacturing Solutions, I sat in the office I had quietly turned into a command center. Safety manuals stacked in perfect order, equipment modification logs filed by date, vendor contact cards organized by priority. Most people saw a workspace. I saw 19 years of weekend calls, emergency fixes, and systems I built because no one else would bother to learn them properly. My name is Lucas Henderson. I'm 47 years old, and I was about to lose everything I'd worked for. Luke, my boss, Timothy Walsh, said, settling into the chair across from my desk like he was delivering good news. Due to restructuring, we're eliminating your position. I didn't react. After 19 years in manufacturing, you learn that silence makes people more uncomfortable than anger ever could. We're bringing in an efficiency coordinator, Tim continued, adjusting his tie. Someone with fresh ideas about automation. Lower overhead, modern approach. Modern approach. That's corporate speak for we found someone cheaper. I started at Midwest right out of the Navy in 2005. Back then, the company still felt like family. Old man Richardson owned it, knew every worker's name, showed up to Christmas parties. When my daughter Sarah was born in 2006, he sent flowers to the hospital. When Kevin came along 2 years later, Richardson joked about starting a college fund. Those days were long gone. Richardson sold to a private equity firm in 2019. The new owners spoke in spreadsheets, not handshakes. They measured efficiency in quarterly reports, not decades of reliability. I understand, I said calmly. Tim exhaled, probably relieved I wasn't making a scene. HR will handle the paperwork. You'll need to clear out by Friday and take everything that belongs to you. He said it casually, like he was doing me a favor. I smiled. Just slightly. Of course, I replied. I'll take everything that's mine. What Tim never bothered to learn was how much of Midwest manufacturing had quietly shifted onto my shoulders over the years. I started as a floor supervisor, working second shift for $18 an hour. Then I became the safety coordinator when old Pete Martinez retired in 2009. Then the process optimization specialist when corporate demanded cost cuts in 2015. Then the informal training director when they stopped hiring experienced workers. When equipment broke down and budgets were frozen, I filled the gaps using my own knowledge, my own documentation, my own relationships with suppliers built over 2 decades. I wrote safety protocols after we had that accident in 2011, when Jerry Williams lost 3 fingers to the stamping press. I developed equipment modifications that saved the company thousands in downtime. I built relationships with vendors who gave us priority service because they trusted me personally. They used to joke about my filing system. Paranoid much, Luke? They'd say when they saw me documenting every process, every vendor contact, every equipment quirk. I called it prepared. The truth was, I'd learned from my Navy days that systems fail when knowledge walks out the door. On the USS Portland, we had a chief who knew every pipe, every valve, every electrical connection on that ship. When he retired, it took 6 months and 3 different people to replace what he carried in his head. I swore I'd never let that happen to me. But corporate didn't see institutional knowledge as an asset. They saw it as a liability, something that made them dependent on expensive employees instead of cheap systems. That evening, I drove home to our house on Maple Street, the same house Jen and I bought in 2008 when the market crashed and we could finally afford something decent. The mortgage payment was $1,800 a month, manageable on my $65,000 salary, but tight with 2 kids in college. How'd it go? Jen asked when I walked through the door. She was grading papers at the kitchen table. She taught 4th grade at Roosevelt Elementary. Had been there almost as long as I'd been at Midwest. They let me go, I said, hanging my jacket on the back of the chair. She looked up from her red pen, studying my face. After 22 years of marriage, She could read me like a technical manual. "How are you feeling?" Honestly? Relieved. That surprised her. Relieved? I sat down across from her, moving aside a stack of math worksheets. "I've been carrying that place for years, Jen. Fixing problems that shouldn't exist, training people who don't stick around, writing protocols nobody reads until something goes wrong. I'm tired of being invisible." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The kids? That was the real concern. Sarah was a sophomore at Ohio State, studying engineering. Kevin was finishing his junior year at Toledo, majoring in business. Between tuition, room and board, and textbooks, we were spending $45,000 a year on their education. The money came from my salary, Jen's teaching income, and what we'd saved in Kevin's college fund that somehow never seemed to grow fast enough. "We'll figure it out," I said. "I've got skills. Experience. Someone will pay for that." Jen nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. At 47, I wasn't exactly in the prime demographic for manufacturing jobs. Companies wanted either fresh graduates they could mold or desperate workers they could underpay. Experienced professionals who knew their worth? Not so much. Thursday morning, before anyone else arrived at Midwest, I unlocked my office and started packing. Box after box of documentation rolled out to my truck. Safety protocols I'd written after the 2011 accident. Equipment modification guides I'd developed to prevent costly breakdowns. Vendor relationships I'd cultivated through years of handshake agreements and mutual respect. OSHA compliance checklists that kept the plant from getting fined. Training manuals I'd written because corporate was too cheap to buy proper documentation. When Tim walked in and saw the empty filing cabinets, his face went pale. "You can't take those," he said, pointing at the boxes. I looked at him, calm as ever. "You told me to take everything that was mine. Those are company documents, written by me, on my own time, using my own expertise. Check the signature lines." By noon, half the institutional knowledge was gone. By Friday, Midwest Manufacturing no longer had the person who knew where the critical information was stored. And Monday morning was coming fast. I spent the weekend in my garage, looking at 19 years of work organized in neat boxes. Every manual, every vendor card, every process improvement I'd documented sat stacked against the workbench where I restored classic cars in my spare time. Currently, a 1967 Camaro sat under a tarp, waiting for me to finish rebuilding the transmission. Funny how I had more patience for a 50-year-old car than a 20-year-old company. My wife Jen brought me coffee and didn't ask too many questions. She knew something big had happened. But she also knew I needed time to process it. After 22 years of marriage, we'd developed that kind of understanding. She gave me space when I needed it, and I talked when I was ready. "The kids called," she said, handing me the mug. "Sarah's worried about her tuition payment next month. Kevin's asking if we can still help with his apartment deposit. Both our kids were smart, hard-working, nothing like the entitled millennials you hear about on talk radio." Sarah was studying mechanical engineering at Ohio State, following in my footsteps, but with better math skills and a degree I never had time to get. Kevin was majoring in business at Toledo, planning to work in manufacturing management. They understood the value of education because they'd watched their parents work for everything they had. But college wasn't like when Jen and I were young. Back in the 80s, you could work summers and part-time jobs to cover tuition. Now, even in-state schools cost $25,000 a year each. We'd been planning for this expense since they were babies, but planning and affording were two different things. "I'll figure something out," I told Jen. "Worst case, they take student loans for a semester while I get back on my feet." She nodded, but I could see the worry lines around her eyes. At 45, Jen made $42,000 a year teaching. Good money in our town, but not enough to carry the family alone. Her pension would be decent when she retired in 15 years, but that didn't help us right now. "Rebecca called," Jen said. "She wanted to check on you." Rebecca was one of the floor supervisors at Midwest, a woman who'd worked her way up from assembly line to management through pure competence and stubbornness. She'd survived 3 rounds of layoffs by being indispensable, the way I thought I was. Apparently, being indispensable only mattered until someone decided you were too expensive. I called Rebecca back that evening while Jen was grading papers. "Luke, I can't believe they let you go," she said. "People are freaking out here." "Freaking? Nobody knows where anything is." "What do you mean?" The new efficiency coordinator showed up Monday morning. Nice girl, fresh out of college, but she doesn't know a torque wrench from a socket set. She spent 2 hours looking for the safety manual for Bay 3. Tim told her it would be in your office, but your office is empty. Bay 3 housed our primary stamping equipment, the machines that shaped metal parts for our biggest contracts. Those machines required specific safety protocols because of their size and power. I'd written those protocols myself after Jerry Williams' accident, working with OSHA inspectors to make sure we never had another incident like that. She found some generic safety guidelines online, Rebecca continued, but they don't match our equipment. The serial numbers are different, the specifications don't align. She asked if I knew where the real documentation was. What did you tell her? I told her Lucas Henderson took it with him, because Lucas Henderson wrote it. Smiled despite myself. Rebecca had always been straight shooter. "It gets worse," she said. "We've got a big delivery due Wednesday for Patterson Construction. They're custom brackets, the ones that need the special modification you developed." I knew exactly what she was talking about. Patterson Construction had been ordering custom structural brackets from us for 3 years, ever since I'd figured out how to modify our standard equipment to meet their specifications. The modification saved them money and gave us a profitable niche product. But the process was complex, requiring precise measurements and timing that I'd documented in detail. The new coordinator tried to run the order using standard procedures, Rebecca said. Half the brackets came out wrong. Tim's talking about subcontracting the work to another shop, but that'll cost us the profit margin and probably lose Patterson as a client. "That's not my problem anymore," I said, and meant it. "I know," Rebecca said quietly. "I just wanted you to know that people here understand what you meant to this place, even if management doesn't." After we hung up, I sat in my garage for a while, thinking about the 19 years I'd spent building systems and relationships that corporate never bothered to value. They saw overhead costs, where I saw institutional knowledge. They saw outdated processes, where I saw proven methods that kept people safe and products consistent. Monday morning, my phone started ringing at 7:30 a.m. I was drinking coffee and reading the local paper, something I hadn't done on a weekday in years. The unemployment office didn't open until 9, and I had appointments lined up for the afternoon with 2 staffing agencies that specialized in manufacturing. I let the first call go to voicemail. Then another call. Another voicemail. I listened to the first message. Tim's voice sounded thinner than usual, faster. "Luke, this is Tim. There's been some confusion about the safety documentation. We need to clarify ownership urgently. Please call me back." I deleted the voicemail and poured another cup of coffee. The second message was from Rebecca. "Luke, things are crazy here. The efficiency coordinator tried to run a safety audit this morning. She couldn't find half the protocols. The stamping press in Bay 3 is making that grinding noise again, and nobody knows your fix for it. Tim's asking if anyone has copies of your documentation. Corporate's sending someone down from Detroit this afternoon to assess the situation. Corporate involvement meant the situation was serious. When Detroit sent people, heads usually rolled. The third call was from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring and checked the voicemail. "Mr. Henderson, This is Patricia Mills from Corporate Operations. We're experiencing some technical challenges and would appreciate a brief consultation. Please call at your earliest convenience. A consultation. Not come back? Not we made a mistake. A consultation. I opened my laptop and checked Midwest Manufacturing's production schedule. Everything was public information if you knew where to look. They had Patterson's delivery due Wednesday, plus a rush order for Williams Steel that required the Bay 3 equipment running at full capacity. Any downtime would cost them thousands in penalty fees. My phone rang again. This time I answered. "Luke," Tim said quickly, "we need some guidance. Nothing major. You know the Bay 3 equipment better than anyone." I leaned against my kitchen counter, watching Jen through the window as she loaded her car for school. "You told me to take everything that was mine." "I did." A long pause. We didn't realize how much that included. "I know," I replied. The line went quiet, except for the sound of a company realizing that institutional knowledge isn't just paperwork. It's the difference between running smoothly and grinding to a halt. "Look," Tim said finally, "what would it take to get you back here?" "We can discuss terms. I'm not coming back," I said calmly. "But I'm available as an independent consultant." "What does that mean?" I'd been thinking about this since Saturday, running the numbers in my head while I organized my garage. "It means you pay my consulting rate, $150 per hour, 4-hour minimum, and I work remotely unless it's an emergency." Tim was quiet. My old salary worked out to about $34 per hour after taxes and benefits. Now they needed to pay $150 for the same knowledge, but only when they needed it. "That's significant," he said. "So was 19 years of experience," I replied. The call ended without agreement. But an hour later, my email chimed. A message from Patricia Mills, the corporate woman. Short and professional. "Mr. Henderson, your consulting terms are acceptable for immediate technical support. Can you address the Bay 3 stamping press issue today? Equipment is experiencing intermittent grinding noise and vibration during operation. I knew that problem. The main bearing housing had a tendency to shift under heavy loads, something I'd identified and developed a fix for in 2018. The solution involved shimming the mounting brackets and adjusting the timing belt tension in a specific sequence. It was a 20-minute job if you knew what you were doing, but potentially thousands in damage if you didn't. I responded with an invoice for 4 hours at $150 per hour, plus a remote access request to review equipment specifications. Payment was processed within 2 hours, faster than Midwest had ever paid any vendor in my memory. The Bay 3 fix took me exactly 18 minutes. I sent detailed instructions with photos I'd taken during previous repairs, logged out of their system, and submitted my completion report. They paid the full 4-hour minimum without complaint. By Wednesday, 3 more consulting requests came in. Patterson Construction's bracket specifications, which required my custom modification process. OSHA compliance questions about confined space procedures I'd written after a near-miss incident in 2016. Vendor contact information for a supplier who only dealt with me personally because of a relationship built over a decade. Each time, they paid my rate without negotiation. Each time, I provided exactly what they asked for, and nothing more. But I also started getting calls from other companies. Word travels fast in manufacturing circles, especially in our region where everyone knows everyone else's business. People noticed that Midwest was hiring expensive consultants for basic operations. They started asking questions. "I heard you left Midwest," said Nick Cooper, a plant manager at Great Lakes Industrial, a company I'd worked with on joint projects over the years. "Are you freelancing now?" "I am," I said. We've got a situation here. Our safety coordinator just retired, and we need someone who understands both operations and compliance. Interested in a contract? Great Lakes was bigger than Midwest. With better equipment and smarter management, they'd been trying to poach me for 3 years. But I'd stayed loyal to Midwest out of some misplaced sense of obligation. What kind of contract? I asked. 3-month project to overhaul our safety protocols and train the new coordinator. $175 per hour, 20 hours per week guaranteed. Flexible schedule. I did the math quickly. $175 times 20 hours times 12 weeks equaled $42,000, almost 2/3 of my old annual salary for a quarter of the time. I'm interested, I said. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 regular consulting contracts: Great Lakes Industrial for safety protocol overhaul, Precision Metals for equipment optimization, and Miller Manufacturing for process documentation. They'd heard about Midwest's problems and wanted to avoid the same mistakes. The work was cleaner, better paid, and came with something I'd forgotten existed: respect. When I recommended safety improvements, clients listened instead of complaining about costs. When I suggested equipment modifications, they asked intelligent questions instead of dismissing the ideas. When I quoted project timelines, they built schedules around my availability instead of demanding miracles. Meanwhile, Midwest struggled. Not dramatically, not in ways that made local headlines. Just the slow erosion that happens when competence leaves, and nobody knows how to replace it properly. Rebecca kept me updated through occasional texts. Patterson Construction canceled their standing order, said quality wasn't consistent anymore. Another OSHA inspector showed up unannounced. Couldn't find proper documentation for half our procedures. Tim brought in McKenzie Consulting to assess our operations. They're charging $300 per hour to tell us what you used to do for free. That last one stung a little. Not because I missed the work, but because I'd been giving away expertise that real consulting firms charged premium rates for. I'd undervalued myself for so long that I'd forgotten what my knowledge was actually worth in the marketplace. 3 months after I left, Jen and I were having dinner when she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you miss it? I thought about it while cutting my steak, the good steak we could afford now that my income had increased by 60%. I miss some of the people. Rebecca, a few of the floor workers. I don't miss feeling invisible. The money's better now, she pointed out. It was. My consulting income was running about $105,000 annually, compared to my old $65,000 salary. Sarah's tuition was covered without stress. Kevin's apartment deposit was handled easily. We were even talking about paying off the mortgage 3 years early and taking a real vacation for our 25th anniversary. The kids noticed the difference, too, Jen said. You're home for dinner most nights now. You're not checking your phone every 10 minutes. She was right. I wasn't driving to the plant at midnight to fix emergencies that turned out to be problems any competent technician could handle. I wasn't absorbing other people's responsibilities without recognition or additional compensation. I wasn't sacrificing family time to prop up a company that saw me as overhead instead of asset. For the first time in 19 years, my expertise belonged to me, and I was finally learning what it was worth. 6 months later, the inevitable happened. Tim was let go during another round of restructuring. The news came through industry connections, not from anyone at Midwest. Rebecca had texted me a week earlier that corporate was conducting performance reviews of all department heads, which usually meant someone was about to get sacrificed to improve quarterly numbers. The plant itself was sold to Great Lakes Industrial, my new client. The irony wasn't lost on me. Great Lakes had been circling Midwest for years, waiting for the right opportunity to acquire their customer contracts and equipment at bargain prices. Midwest's operational problems had made that opportunity inevitable. Nick Cooper called me the day the sale was announced. "Congratulations," he said. "You're about to become our most valuable consultant." "How's that?" "We just bought Midwest's assets, including their customer contracts and equipment. Guess who's going to help us integrate everything and get their operations running properly?" The integration project was worth $85,000 over 6 months, more than my entire previous annual salary. Great Lakes wanted me to document every process, train their staff on Midwest's equipment, and establish proper safety protocols for the combined operation. Essentially, they were paying me to do what I'd been doing at Midwest for free. Except now they recognized its value. I drove past the old Midwest facility one afternoon during the integration work. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to the skeleton crew keeping basic operations running until the transition was complete. The sign still read Midwest Manufacturing Solutions, but everyone knew it was just a matter of time before it came down. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, more like closure. The company that had treated my expertise as disposable overhead was being dismantled by people who understood its value. The building would survive, the equipment would keep running, but under management that invested in knowledge instead of treating it as a cost center. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Daniel Rodriguez, the CFO who'd survived Tim's firing. "Luke," he said, his voice careful and professional. "I want to discuss a proposition." "I'm listening." "Great Lakes has made an offer for our remaining assets, but there are conditions. They want guarantees about operational continuity, safety compliance, customer relationship stability. Frankly, they're concerned about institutional knowledge gaps." "That's understandable," I said. "We'd like to hire you as an interim operations director to facilitate the transition. Salary plus equity in the sale proceeds. Full authority to implement whatever systems you think are necessary." It was everything I'd wanted 6 months ago. Recognition, authority, compensation that reflected my value. But I wasn't the same person who'd been fired from that office. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not interested in coming back as an employee." "What would it take?" "Nothing. I've moved on." The silence on Daniel's end was telling. 6 months ago, they'd eliminated my position to save money. Now they were offering equity and authority because my absence was costing them everything. "We could structure it as a consulting arrangement," he said finally. "I already have a consulting arrangement with Great Lakes. When they take over, I'll be working with them to optimize the operation. But I won't be working for Midwest again." After we hung up, I sat in my home office. The spare bedroom I'd converted into a proper workspace with filing cabinets, a good desk, and walls covered with certifications and photos from successful projects. It was quieter than my old office, cleaner, and completely mine. Jen knocked on the doorframe. "How'd it go?" "They offered me Tim's job." "And?" I turned it down. She smiled. "Good. You've built something better." She was right. Over the past 6 months, I'd built a consulting practice that gave me everything corporate employment had never provided. Respect for my expertise, compensation that reflected my value, and control over my time. I worked with 5 regular clients now, plus project work that kept me busy but not overwhelmed. The money was better. I'd gross about $130,000 this year compared to my old $65,000 salary. But more importantly, the work had meaning again. Clients called because they valued my input, not because they needed someone to blame when things went wrong. They implemented my recommendations instead of filing them away. They paid my invoices promptly and referred new business. Last month, Sarah had called from Ohio State to tell me she'd been accepted into an advanced engineering program that would add a year to her degree but significantly improve her job prospects. 2 years ago, that call would have meant financial stress and difficult conversations about student loans. Now, it meant celebration. "Dad," she'd said, I know the extra year costs more money. Are you sure we can handle it? We can handle it, I'd told her, and meant it. Kevin graduated that spring with job offers from 3 different manufacturing companies. All of them had heard about my work through industry connections and specifically recruited him because of our family name. That felt better than any performance review I'd ever received. The morning Great Lakes officially took over Midwest's operations, I drove to the facility for my final integration meeting. The new sign was already up. Great Lakes Industrial, Cleveland Division. The parking lot was full again, workers arriving for shifts that would actually utilize their skills instead of just grinding them down. Nick Cooper met me in what used to be Tim's office. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like coming full circle," I said. Through the window, I could see the Bay 3 stamping equipment running smoothly, operated by workers who'd been properly trained on the procedures I'd written. The safety protocols were posted clearly, updated, and improved based on my recommendations. The equipment modification I'd developed was now company standard, documented and teachable instead of locked in one person's memory. "We want to offer you a permanent position," Nick said. "Operations Director, full benefits, equity participation." I'd been expecting this conversation. I'm flattered, but I like what I've built. Independent gives me options. He nodded. "Fair enough. But the consulting contract is open-ended as far as we're concerned. This place runs better with your input. Driving home that afternoon, I passed the unemployment office where I'd filed my initial claim 9 months earlier. The same building, the same parking lot, but I was a different person. Not because of the money, though that certainly helped. Because I'd finally learned the difference between being needed and being valued. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Another potential client, referred by someone I'd worked with. I'd take the call later, after dinner with my family. These days, business happened during business hours. Home time belonged to the people who'd supported me through the transition. I walked into my house, hung my jacket on the back of the kitchen chair, and kissed my wife hello. In the garage, the 1967 Camaro waited under its tarp, transmission finally rebuilt, and ready for road testing. Some projects take time, but when they're done right, they last.